Vanessa, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
You are very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So I definitely want to start by just hearing your story. I know you've been in recovery for 10 years now, I believe. So I definitely want to hear about your journey up until that point where you sought treatment. So if you don't mind to go ahead and start there.
Sure, absolutely. So I am from Martin County, Kentucky, a little town called Tomahawk, born and raised. My dad is a disabled coal miner, and my mom actually was in the direct sales business my entire life. So I have one older sister. I was the baby, and I mean, we were raised in pretty middle class family. We were only below the poverty guidelines once when my dad got hurt one time, in the mines, for the first time he ever got hurt. And my mom was always a really strong Christian. I mean, we went to church every Sunday and Wednesday, whether we wanted to or not. Like, that was just the routine. That's what we did. But my dad was not a Christian at all when I was growing up. He was more the party guy and just like enjoyed his friends, and all that kind of stuff. So growing up, I had this really divided home when it came to things like that. And here I would see my mom trying to do everything right, but yet she was really stressed out and really hateful and had the weight of the world on her shoulders. And then my dad was just enjoying life and not doing what he should and all those things. But he was still he was not stressed out and hateful. I mean, he was enjoyable. And so I was always drawn to my dad. And, life went on. I was overweight in school. My entire later elementary and middle school years, I was overweight. You get in the 8th grade and it's like, oh, I want to be skinny like the other girls. So I think that's when probably the whole mental obsession things started before drugs ever did. Because I basically starved myself all summer between 8th and 9th grade, and I lost all kinds of weight. And so then you go into 9th grade, for the first time you have guys looking at you, and just these normal, I mean, I see them as normal. I hear a lot of girls talk about them, just normal insecurities, normal girl insecurities that you have, and just wanting to fit in, not really knowing where I fit in. I was in this group called Focus, for advanced kids, in elementary and middle school. And then I felt like I wasn't really fitting in with those kids. They enjoyed wanting to be the smartest kid in the class, and I really could care less. That wasn't really my group. I loved them, they were my friends, but you know what I mean? I didn't have that same gear in my head going, oh my gosh, I had to be the top of the class. I was just I just want to have some fun, kind of thing. So I started working at a gas station when I was 15, and I literally met everyone I never needed to know. That it was a good thought and a good idea for, to help my family out with some money, but it was literally the worst decision that could have probably been made for me and my family. Not that things wouldn't have ended up the same way, but that just projected me into this whole new crowd of people who were automatically accepting me, who were already on drugs and drinking and all this kind of stuff, work until midnight in the summer when you're 15 at a gas station. I mean, it's just not a good scenario. So I started experimenting with alcohol first, and then marijuana shortly thereafter. And by the time I was 17, I mean, I had my own prescription of pain pills. I'd already started using pain pills. And by the time I was 17, had my own prescription. I'd been in a car accident, had got an MRI at that point in time. I mean, that's the golden ticket. I mean, you could take an MRI anywhere. I mean, once I turned 18, I mean, it was on, I mean, you could get pills from any pill mill doctor around here at the time. And so everything just progressed. I mean, I went on to college. I became a dental assistant. I did dental assisting for, I don't know, probably 7, almost 8 years of my addiction. And so it's pretty easy to find a job. And for the longest time, I would have considered myself, quote, quote, a functioning addict, if that's even a thing. I did go to work every day, and I felt I was okay as long as I could go through a traffic stop And unless I was intoxicated, they could not pull me over. Like I was able to pay for tags on my car. I had insurance, like those things kept me in that realm of what I felt was normal, because a lot of the people that I was interacting with, they were unable to do all those things, So like, really fooled myself for a long time. Most of my addiction could be determined by the guy I was with. It was like whatever, well, this guy, he was a pothead. Well, I was a pothead. Well, this guy was doing Oxycontin, so I was doing more Oxycontin. Well, this guy was selling Oxycontin, so we were doing a lot of Oxycontin, and like, so it's just wherever, wherever it was, which I think you hear a lot of stories like that. I mean, that's pretty typical. The codependency goes right along with addiction. So I moved a lot, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Ohio. Didn't really move outside of the tri-state area, but I was just not settled, just kind of going with the wind. I mean, I'll never forget like meeting a guy in a bar in West Virginia, and 9 days later moving to Ohio with him, because that was probably where I was going to find, the one. So I mean, things like that, just that really, I mean, I look back on them and I'm like, what in the world was I thinking? I obviously wasn't, because that's just like scary. Not only not logical, but it's just scary. But I mean, that was kind of the way my life went throughout all those years. Got in trouble here and there. Got arrested for the first time when I lived in Columbus. I lived there almost 4 years in Grove City. I was a dental assistant, like the whole time I was up there. And well, until about the last 6 months when I couldn't. There was a period of time where I was unable to hold it together after I got arrested, and I was working at a bar. You can normally hold that job together. You don't have to go in until nighttime. But yeah, so I did that while I was up there, and ended up coming back to Kentucky and got arrested multiple other times, in different counties, and went back to college. Like when I went back to get my bachelor's degree in 2016, like I already had an associate's degree plus, but I didn't know, I just done classes here and there, different colleges, different things. But then I ended up in West Virginia. Things got really bad. In 2008, I became an IV drug user and went from snorting pills to shooting them up intravenously. But thankfully at that time, like heroin was not readily available. Yeah, thankfully. And like meth really wasn't the rage, at that point in time. I mean, I had done both of them, but they were not, like, it was still the pill mills. Like that was still what was going on back then. And so that was still what was pretty easy to get. So for the last 2 years of my addiction, like now that's when everything fell apart. I mean, once I started shooting up, I could not hold down a job. Absolutely could not. Tried everything that I possibly could to bring that sense of normalcy back to my life. I mean, got fired from the tobacco store, I mean, like could not hold anything down, like, I mean, just could not do it. And began a whole career in stealing and just whatever I had to do to get it. Like every moral that my mom had tried to instill into me, like it just went out the window basically. And so I ended up getting arrested a few more times, and in 2010 I'd been arrested for possession and paraphernalia, and then got a DUI and another possession. And then I went to court back to back 2 days in a row. That is never good. And like they arrested me at the courthouse for theft. Like, I mean, like it just crazy. I mean, everything just came to a screeching halt, basically, is what had happened. Like I had the county attorney at the time, Keenis Maynard, thank God for him. Like he had watched me grow up. My sister had went to school with his son, and he just looked at me that second day in court and he's like, I will not have your death on my conscience. Either I'm going to give you a county year, you're going to do 365 in jail, or you can go get help. And that was his exact words to me, standing right there at the bench. I'll never forget it. And I'm just like, get help. I mean, like, what does that even mean? Like the only person that I knew at that time that had ever been to treatment was literally getting high with me, telling me I was young enough, I should probably try to do something with my life. Maybe I should get help, while they were getting high with me. I'm like, what kind of hope does that actually give you? Like, why would I try that? And so he gave me the number to Odyssey, which is a nonprofit that started addiction recovery care. And that's the only number he gave me. And I mean, my mom grabbed a hold of that and latched onto it. And she was like, it is going to happen. Like and I'm like, all my friends are in jail, mom. You know, like, I mean, there had just been a Unite bust in Martin County. And so like I had like 4 different friends in jail. You know, some of them are actually still friends and doing well, but now some of them technically were just acquaintances. But I was not, I mean, I'd never done a jail time like that, you know, like 5, 7 days, you know, things like that. But I'd never been incarcerated for any lengthy amount of time. Nothing I'd ever been in trouble for had ever been anything more than just PI, possession, DUI, things like that. Small possession. They had never caught me with anything big. But yeah, thank God for my mom. I mean, she really, you know, between her and Keenis Maynard, I mean, they really made sure that I ended up where I needed to be, which was as the first resident of Karen's Place on December 2nd, 2010.
Which is incredible. So it has been 10 years now.
Yeah.
That's a really incredible story. And a lot of times when I'm doing these interviews and talking to people who are in recovery, it's kind of amazing to me that, you know, some people do end up incarcerated and some people do end up in treatment. It sounds like you got very lucky to have people who believed in you and supported your recovery, gave you that option, whereas some of your friends didn't get that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But what did treatment look like for you? And what would it have been like if you didn't have that opportunity? If you had been in prison, how do you think your life would be today? You know?
Okay, so for me, like, I mean, when I went to Karen's Place, they had no idea what they were doing. Like, I was the first one, and they were like all waiting with anticipation of, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with her? They were actually under the umbrella of Teen Challenge at the time, and so it was very different from what it is now. I mean, of course, at the heart of who ARC is will forever be a ministry. You know, when you start as that, that's what it's going to be. You know, but that was all they were at that point in time. So it was, I mean, a lot of prayer and Bible study. And I mean, there was not a 12-step program. They didn't have a counselor. It was volunteers who were there making sure that I stayed sober, sharing the love of God with me. Like that's what my treatment was. I stayed for 6 months, and I mean, definitely transformation happened in my life. I mean, I have had to seek out different things when it comes to recovery and learning recovery since then. And, you know, staying in the recovery field has allowed me to do that. But we did not have a lot of recovery principles. I mean, just whatever Teen Challenge shared, which was basically the Bible. But I completed, they had a 6-month program. That was really, they had that and a 100-day program. And I was certain they were not going to make me stay 6 months because I was not that bad of a person. Like, that's the way I looked at it. And, but when I went back to court, they're like, yeah, you're doing 6 months. So I ended up doing their whole 6 months. And then it was summer of 2011, and I was getting ready to get out. And all I could think was like, I mean, everything I did, like the wildest I had ever been was in the summer. And I was just like, I don't know that I can do this. You know, like, I don't know if I'm ready for that, because I had been sober for 6 months. There was a gal there who had 17 months sober when I had arrived, and she had went to a treatment center somewhere up in the northeastern states. I can't remember the state, but and so it's like, all I could think was, if she can be 17 months sober, maybe I can too. Like, you know, like, that was my thought process. Like, that was as far as my mind would allow me to go with the ability to stay sober at that point in time, because I didn't know anybody else who had been, you know, sober off of pills. Like, I mean, I met Mr. Robinson, and he had alcohol, but an alcohol, of course, you would resort to if there weren't any pills. But I related more with her because she had the same type of drug addiction that I had. So I ended up staying on as an intern, and I did another 6 months in their internship, which was a lot more freedom. Now, when I was in treatment, like, my parents, I did not leave that facility with anyone besides their workers for 5 months. There was, they did not believe it. Like, they were like, we're going to keep you here and make sure you're safe, and we're going to make sure that you're okay. So it was like super strict when it came to things like that. But gosh, man, I needed that. You know, like, I needed that time alone. I needed that time to really just learn to be quiet with my thoughts again. I mean, I can remember sitting in, they called it the great room at the time. They may still call it that, but I can remember sitting there. They literally had lawn furniture in the living room, basically, because they didn't have any money. You know, like, there was this big, pretty house, but like, they didn't have any money to do anything like that. Everything was done on donations. And I mean, but I can remember sitting there, and my thoughts were just racing, and I would try to read something and I could not retain it. I could not put, like, I mean, it was just my mind was so twisted when I got there. It was just so messed up from all the years of drug abuse. And I can remember finding the verse, I think it's 2 Timothy 1:17, 1:7, and it says, God did not give me the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And I remember sitting there and like almost screaming. I'm like, I mean, I had believed in God when I was a kid, and not that I really didn't believe in him. I just thought he was so mad at me that he could never love me again. Like during my addiction. But I can remember sitting there thinking, okay, they're telling me that this Bible is real and God, you love me. And I'm trying to realize that and believe that. And if your Bible's real and this verse says I can have a sound mind, then like you have to give me a sound mind again. Like I mean, just like really focusing in on like if I'm going to choose to follow you and I'm going to choose to believe in you, then I'm going to believe that you're going to give me everything that that the Bible says I can have. So lots of moments like that. But I finished the internship and then I became staff, and I stayed with them 6 years after that. And then I left and did my network marketing business. I'm still doing that, but I do contract work for them. I have a contract through EKSEP doing success coaching now for ARC's employees too. So, I mean, I'm still very involved with ARC. I mean, once with ARC, always with ARC. I don't know, but that's kind of what it feels like.
Which is completely understandable, especially with what all they did for you during your time there.
Yeah.
And that really kind of brings up a question in my mind, because I feel like a lot of times people go through, trying to get into recovery, and they go through a program and then they come out, like you said, you were about to come out and you were like, I don't know what to do, how to do this. I don't know if I can stay sober over the summer. And so you stayed with them. I feel like a lot of people come out and they end up working with people or recovery centers, one, because they want to help other people who are going through the same, but also because they're afraid that other employers won't maybe look at them the same way that they want to be looked at. So obviously part of what the Kentucky Chamber is doing with the Kentucky Comeback Program is showing that there are fair chance employers, that there are people who are hiring, who have jobs for people who have a background. But what do you think Kentucky and businesses or anybody still needs to do to make this transition a lot easier for people who are coming out of treatment and in recovery?
Yeah, I think being able to have resources. I mean, like people in recovery, they need accountability, and if they are truly working a program and wanting to stay sober, they're going to welcome that accountability. But having someone on staff there, I mean, like for me as a success coach, I know that's an option that is available to all the employers in Kentucky right now. I feel like having a person there who can be that accountability and help them walk through hurdles is such a big deal. But it's not, I don't just do success coaching for people in recovery. I mean, it's all employees, and a lot of people have the exact same needs, whether you're in recovery or not. But there's definitely a bridge that needs to be built between employers and people in recovery, because people in recovery are loyal. Like they are some of the most loyal people, and they are grateful. And when you have a loyal and grateful employee, you have a good employee. You have someone who's going to show up to work, who's going to do the best that they can, who's going to be so grateful for the opportunity. So, I mean, to me, it's just silly. I mean, people can change, it's just silly why people still don't want to hire people in recovery. I understand the risk that you're running, but you're running that risk with anyone. Anyone can end up addicted. No one would have ever imagined I would have ended up a drug addict ever. Like that's not the plan that anyone saw for my life. And so, I mean, the thought that anybody, I mean, and you probably have more drug addiction in your, a lot of people do, like have a drug addiction already in their workforce. They just don't know about it. So having those open and honest conversations, and allowing people to feel like they're safe, whether they have a problem or they're in recovery, I think that's vital for employers across the world.
Absolutely. And so I know that we're trying to, obviously Kentucky has advanced quite a bit since 2010 when you were going through treatment. We have so many more treatment facilities and it's gotten so much better. But I think a lot of times still we hear that there's not enough treatment beds, and sometimes people end up incarcerated or going through treatment in prison rather than in a facility. Which is definitely not what we want to do, because then you have prison on your record and then you have a hard time getting employed and things like that. But I know in the legislature this year, there's already been a bill filed for recovery ready communities. There's some legislation that's going to start moving. I know that's something you've always been very interested in. So
Mhm.
talk to me a little bit about how you see that looking and how communities can get involved, because a lot of it is wraparound services. A lot of it is coming home to your community and knowing that you're going to be accepted again and that you can be a part of your community again. And so what does that look like to you?
So when we lived in Somerset, my husband and I did for a year in 2014, 2015, I think. We moved there to open Lake Hills Oasis for ARC, and like they're a work ready community. And I can remember like going home one day and I told my husband, I'm like, we have to have recovery ready communities. Like I brought it up in every meeting I was like with the corporate office at ARC. I'm like, for years, it was like, can't we do something about this recovery ready community? And so when I heard that was going to happen, I was just like, oh my gosh, finally, it's literally even the same words that it's just really cool how those things happen. So I am really excited about the thoughts of that. But I feel like communities probably have a lot of the pieces already in them that are necessary for people in recovery. Like you need safe housing. You need to have churches have the most people in them in a community. Having your churches on board is vital. I mean, you have people who are willing, a lot of them are, if they're just educated on how to work with people in recovery, they are willing to do that. They already have a heart to help people. And so I feel like churches are a big part, which churches played a big part in my recovery. So that makes sense to me, I think, to think that. But you need to have treatment options. You need to have a safe place for meetings that are posted. It needs to be known, like where they are. Different kinds of meetings. I mean, you can have NA, AA, Al-Anon, you can have Celebrate Recovery. I mean, whatever it is, like you need to have a wide variety because people are going to choose their path of recovery and everyone's isn't going to look the same. And that's 1,000,000% okay. We are all different and it does not have to look the same for everyone. So having those options in the community, just really having everything that's already there brought together to where it is a resource that can be handed off and people are ready to spring into action when it comes to helping someone. Housing has been one of the biggest things that has been an issue, I feel like, because I mean, you're most of the time you're going to start out at a lower paying job. And so therefore you're going to have lower income type housing. And where is a lot of the drug activity right now in the community? Lower income type housing. I mean, that's just how it's always been. And it always was like that when I was in recovery and it's, or in addiction. And I know it's still like that now because of just the level that they're at with the income that they have. So having safe housing is huge. When my husband and I got out of treatment, when I got out of treatment, we got married. He was sober about almost a year longer than me. But we got married, and we ended up moving into this transitional community. It was through the Father Biding Appalachian Mission Center, which Father Biding has since passed away. And ARC actually is in the building that Father Biding had, which is kind of cool. But he had a transitional community, and we were able to live there. We paid like a portion of our bills for 3 months. It went up at 6 months. It went up again, and it just kept going up until we were paying normal bills. And we had to work the program there. They had meetings we had to attend. They had a counselor there on staff. It was a Christian counselor, but we had to, do sessions with them, make sure that all of our bills were on time. But it taught us how to live again. And that model completely set us up for success. When our year was up, we knew what it was like to pay bills, water, electric, everything. And so in my dream, like something like that is what people in recovery getting back on their feet need, because it literally set us up for success to be able to know how to. We hadn't lived normal in a long time. We hadn't done those things. I mean, even when I thought I was normal in addiction, I was not paying rent. I was sleeping on couches. I just had a car that had insurance on it, and I thought I was okay. So that was huge. Like that type of model where because treatment does not end when you walk out the doors. Like that your recovery does not end when you walk out the doors. There's so many steps. There's so many things you have to learn. You have to learn to navigate the normal stressors of life by having proper support. And with each increment that you take when it comes to leaving the door or leaving an internship or whatever you do, you're going to have new stressors in life. And so learning to navigate all of that with proper support around you is so, so important.
That's such a good point, because I think a lot of times and more we're hearing about what it looks like when someone gets out of incarceration. Like they come out with no ID, they come out with no money, and you're either you go back to where you came from, where your friends and family and the situation that you started in is, or, you try and start something new, but it's so hard. And, transitional housing is so important. I think that we don't talk about that enough with recovery, because like you said, you hadn't been living a normal life in a very long time. So you come out in the same situation. Yes, you're now sober, but you don't have a job. You don't have, like there are a lot of things that are still, and I think wraparound services is so key. But kind of to wrap things up, what else do you think that Kentucky still needs to do, or how do you think that Kentucky can help people in recovery? Because we've seen that this is affecting so many people, and while we're getting better and people are getting employed and we're seeing such a big difference, there's still so much work to do. So what do you think some of those next best steps would be for Kentucky to take?
I mean, there's definitely a prevention factor that needs to be ramped up. Because I know that in the school system, there's counseling available for kids who they deem necessary, but the fact is, a lot of the children in the school system now are being raised by grandparents, or they're third generation in addiction at this point. It's not just like, oh, some kids' moms or dads might have a problem, but like having some type of program that's mandatory counseling, teaching these kids coping skills, teaching these kids how to navigate hard things in life without resorting to using a substance to be able to do that. To me, that is like vital. That's vital, because if not, you're going to continue to have people being raised and then going into the exact same system, incarceration, treatment, whatever it is, and that's never going to end if there's not some type of prevention effort that's put into place. And I know they have some. I understand that. Like there's Unite has things. There's when we had Dare, I don't even know if that's around, but I know there are some things. But when I think of this, what I was lacking that caused me to turn to drugs versus coping with life normally, with normal high school insecurities. I didn't have a traumatic childhood. I know we all have a level of trauma, and that comes from even a normal, I get that, but I didn't have a traumatic childhood like a lot of these kids have, or a lot of the people that I ended up in addiction with. But I could have definitely used someone to help me navigate normal teenage insecurities. I could have, absolutely. So I feel like focusing more on that in the education system, that's just where we're at today. You can't just learn to read, write, and do math. That's not what you're able to do in school anymore, because it's the emotional intelligence and emotional stability that people are missing that causes them to turn into drugs in the first place. And once you use them, I didn't know I was going to end up being addicted to them. The people I was getting high with, 80% of them didn't end up addicted and went on with life and never ended up in the shape that I ended up in. But you never know who's going to end up that way, and especially with the families that are second and third generation, that's all they've known is drug addiction, prison, selling pills, making meth. Whatever. Like that's all they've known. When you have that as the incubator that the kids are in, plus you have the fact that there's no emotional support beyond just normal teachers. To me, I feel like there needs to be a whole class like every year, like that needs to talk about managing your emotions, like how to do those things to where you can deal with life circumstances and be able to handle yourself in a way that doesn't cause you to use drugs instead of navigating emotionally well.
I think that's a very good point, especially as we are looking more and more at it. I think the early prevention, and because it starts so much earlier than we think it does. Like you said, you ended up, starting to think about some of these things in middle school and then acting in high school. I've heard of, Kenny Bearden, who works with ARC, had overdosed 7 times already by the time he was 13. And that's crazy. Yeah. So it's starting so much earlier. And I think that's such a good point, because the early prevention and even just who people are getting involved with, like you said, it always with, and then I ended up with the wrong people, every story I've heard. And so I think something in school is so important. Just starting early on these conversations, because it is so much more a mental health thing than we realize, and things. So I think you made some very good points. Anything else that we haven't covered that you want to say before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think Kentucky's doing a great job. I feel like they're leading the way in the nation, when it comes to making sure that they're keeping their eye on what's going on and trying to problem solve it. So I'm really proud be in Kentucky. I mean, it's a great place to be, right?